But I would like to take a few minutes just to understand this final theme, which is quels sont les défis les plus courants auxquels les personnes autistes sont confrontées au travail? Jean-Julien?
On va essayer de faire ça court. Il y en a quelques-uns qui sont effectivement plus simples. On a parlé des préjugés, donc je pense que ce qu'il faut, c'est rester ouvert. Souvent, la flexibilité dont on peut avoir besoin est quelque chose qui est sous-utilisé, sous-exploité, alors que ça devrait être mis de l'avant. Donc, concrètement, moi, j'ai plusieurs de mes collègues qui sont plus efficients l'après-midi et en soirée que tôt le matin. Parce qu'on peut avoir des soucis des enjeux de sommeil ou de fatigue. Donc d'avoir de se donner le droit de profiter de cette flexibilité dans une optique d'efficience. Je pense que c'est important souvent de considérer ça. Les obstacles courants peuvent être souvent de vouloir forcer une intégration. Moi, j'ai plein d'exemples où, tu sais, si j'allais pas à un party de bureau, c'était pas bien vu. Si je participais pas aux activités offertes par l'entreprise, on allait toujours me traiter de weirdo ou de personne qui veut pas s'intégrer. Et en fait, non, c'est juste que moi, ça répond pas nécessairement aux besoins d'intégration que je peux apporter à l'entreprise. Donc, si je peux résumer ça, c'est il y a un cadre, on a tous besoin d'un cadre commun de fonctionnement. Mais je trouve que la beauté de l'humain, c'est aussi d'avoir cette capacité de sortir du cadre et de voir que en sortant du cadre, le cadre ne disparaît pas et que ça donne des possibilités supplémentaires aux personnes en emploi de contribuer à ce que le cadre s'agrandisse. Et donc, le cadre est toujours là, mais il prend des couleurs supplémentaires, il prend des formes supplémentaires. Donc, les défis, je dirais, c'est surtout de donner ce message-là. C'est, OK, je suis conscient qu'il y a un cadre, mais est-ce que je peux sortir de temps en temps du cadre? Et est-ce que ça va permettre à l'entreprise de pouvoir, elle aussi, agrandir son carré de sable, agrandir son terrain de jeu? Donc, le défi principal, je pense qu'il est là, ouais.
Thank you, Jean-Julien. I'm going to summarize that probably not as eloquently to say people over process, looking at how processes can be expanded to focus on the work itself as opposed to the process itself. Tonie, can I turn this question over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Most common challenge. I think I'm going to take a moment to talk about autistic burnout. I think this might be something, and I think that is sort of maybe the outcome of, or like the culmination potentially of series of challenges that can sometimes go on or can be sort of micro challenges on a day-to-day basis. And so I sort of referred to, previously not knowing I was autistic and sort of compensating and navigating things and masking so much that I was really just depleting my battery, on an ongoing basis. And so by the time the workday would come, I often wouldn't have capacity for much more. And so with that reality, eventually that turns into, that has a compounding impact. And while there's a lot of things that can sort of mitigate the reality of autistic burnout, also the reality is that autistic people are still autistic when they're not working, right? So we're still processing, we're still living a full life that, we're also experiencing lots of processing from, lots of, stimulus from, and things like that. And the outcome, if we're not really in a workplace where we have an opportunity to engage in flexible supports or to not mask for a day, or have sort of, a comfortable enough relationship that you can say, to your manager, hey, I'm really burnt out, I need a day. Not being in positions where you're not really able to do that, at the end of the day, becomes a retention issue, and becomes like you have an employee that becomes a retention issue, or potentially can become a performance issue, depending on how it's impacting someone. And so, but in the background, you potentially have an autistic person who's completely burnt out from their environment, and sort of the ongoing things that they're experiencing. And a really simple example I can give is, I did not know, despite working 8 years in an office, that I have a sensitivity to overhead lighting. So almost around 1 p.m. every day, I would get a brutal headache that would often mean that I really struggled to be overly productive in the afternoon. And I really struggled with it. It was something I felt a lot of shame about. I didn't understand why it was so hard for me. And then I started working from home, and I got an overhead lamp that goes right over my computer. And now I no longer have sort of that sensory overwhelm was resulting in burnout, as an example. And so now that I have the flexibility to, one, be at home, but also to understand these sort of options, I'm able to mitigate the potential challenges, and it increases my capacity to deal with other challenges. And so that was a really roundabout sort of way of saying that autistic burnout is a reality for many autistic employees. It is not the same as sort of how we regularly talk about burnout. Autistic burnout can come in cycles of, you could be burnt out by noon on a day. You could be burnt out, a couple times a week. The cycles are incredibly different, and sort of acknowledging that and providing flexibility for people to take care of themselves how they need to, while still being able to do their job, is a delicate balance to find, but it's possible.
Thank you. That's really important information that you're sharing, Tonie. And I'm going to move us on in a moment, but I wonder if one of you can briefly speak to the idea. People here are hearing, okay, well, you don't know if someone's autistic, and someone might not have told me that they're autistic. So how am I going to meet their needs at work without knowing? I wonder if just briefly one of you can speak to that.
Ask questions. So I think if assumptions, if there's an opportunity to provide structure, to understand why someone may be experiencing a certain challenge, sort of having a conversation, seeing if there's a different way to approach the project, things like that. You don't need to know that somebody's autistic, but also there's a plethora of other experiences that someone could have that could be presenting as challenges at work, or whatever their reality of their experience is at that time. And so being able to ask questions and understanding that some of the supports that I benefit from, and as an autistic person, also benefit everyone else. I like to have meeting notes. I like to have an agenda. I like to get my deliverables in writing. I like to have notice before a meeting. I like to have context, not just, my manager, Ali, sending me a Teams invitation the night before saying, hey, important meeting, with no other context, right? Like, I'm not going to sleep that night, which I think most people wouldn't, but that's sort of an example of something that we talk about as being a neuro-inclusive practice, and we talk about in this context, but I think all of us certainly benefit from that. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so ways to create a universally accessible workplace, getting to know your employees and understand them irrespective of disclosure is what I'm hearing. Thank you, Tonie.